My name is Veronica Ashford, and I was 32 years old the night my sister laughed while they mocked me at her merger party, right before everything I had quietly built came into position. The most shocking moment didn't come when the room turned toward me or when the champagne laughter sharpened into something cruel. It came when my younger sister, Lydia, lifted her glass, smiled that polished executive smile she'd practiced in mirrors since college, and said, "And of course, thank you to everyone who made this possible, except my sister Veronica, who's still figuring herself out." The room laughed. Not nervous laughter, not polite laughter, real laughter. I stood there in a borrowed black dress, heels pinching my toes, my name stitched in gold on a guest badge that didn't say partner, director, or investor, just guest. I remember the heat crawling up my neck, the way my hands curled into fists so tight my nails left half moon marks in my palms. I remember my mother's face, tight smile, eyes flicking away, my father's slow sip of whiskey, as if this were expected. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that while they were laughing, the documents in my clutch were already signed, the wire transfer had already cleared, and the company Lydia was celebrating, it existed because of me. Before we go any further, if you've ever been humiliated by family, underestimated by people who share your blood, or laughed at while quietly carrying the weight of everyone else's success, please pause for a second. Like this video, subscribe if stories of truth and delayed justice matter to you, and stay because what happened next changed everything. The laughter echoed longer than it should have. It bounced off the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Halston Hotel, glittering like a room full of stars that refused to shine on me. Lydia's friends, sleek men in tailored suits, women with lips the color of fresh bruises, turned to look at me openly now. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was the punchline. I smiled. I don't know how, but I did. The kind of smile women learn when they grow up second, when they learn early that reacting only feeds the fire. My heart pounded so loud I was sure someone could hear it. I adjusted my clutch, nodded once, and stepped back as if I were just another guest making room for applause. But inside, I was 13 again. I was back in our childhood home, standing in the doorway of my bedroom while Lydia practiced piano in the living room. I had been good at it once, better than her. But when the teacher said lessons were expensive, my parents decided one of us had to quit. They didn't even ask who wanted it more. Lydia had talent, they said. Lydia had potential. I had other strengths. Those words followed me my entire life. Other strengths. It was the phrase used when no one wanted to name what you lacked. Growing up, Lydia was the bright one, the one teachers praised, relatives bragged about, neighbors pointed to as proof that the Ashfords were doing something right. I was the reliable one, the one who babysat, who helped with homework, who learned to cook dinner when mom worked late. I learned early how to fold myself small so others could feel large. When Lydia went to college, my parents emptied their savings. When I went, I worked 2 jobs and took out loans they never helped me pay. When Lydia started her first company, my father told everyone she was fearless. When I hesitated before quitting a stable job to start my own consultancy, he called me impractical. Yet somehow, I kept going. The ballroom smelled like money, floral arrangements flown in from overseas, trays of seafood so fresh it still glistened. On the far wall, a massive screen looped Lydia's company logo beside the new partner's name. The merger was being called historic. The room buzzed with words like visionary, trailblazer, genius. No one used those words for me. I drifted toward the edge of the room, pretending to study a painting while snippets of conversation floated past me. Is that her sister? I thought she'd be more... Poor thing. Must be hard living in her shadow. Each sentence landed like a pebble tossed at glass. Not enough to shatter me, enough to crack something already fragile. Lydia hadn't always been cruel. That's the part people don't understand. She hadn't pushed me down staircases or stolen my clothes. Her betrayal was quieter, more polished. She learned early how to take credit with a smile, how to accept help without acknowledging its source. 5 years ago, when she called me crying about her startup hemorrhaging cash, I didn't hesitate. I sat at my kitchen table until 3 a.m., restructuring her pitch deck, rewriting her projections, connecting her with contacts I'd built quietly over a decade. I didn't ask for equity. I didn't ask for acknowledgement. I told myself family didn't keep score. That night at the merger party, she kept score for me. Veronica, a voice cut through my thoughts. It was Ethan, Lydia's fiancé, tall and earnest, with a smile that always felt borrowed. "Hey, you okay?" "I'm fine," I said automatically. He hesitated, glancing back towards Lydia, who was surrounded by investors. "She didn't mean it like that." I looked at him then, really looked. "How did she mean it, Ethan?" He didn't answer. Silence can be louder than laughter. I excused myself and stepped out onto the balcony. The city spread below, lights blinking like 1,000 unsent messages. The cool air pressed against my skin, grounding me. I breathed in slowly, counting like my therapist taught me. In for 4, hold, out for 6. I thought about walking away, about disappearing the way I always did, but something in me, something tired of shrinking, stayed my feet. Inside my clutch were copies of contracts I'd reviewed earlier that day, not for Lydia, for myself. While she planned this party, I'd finalized the acquisition of a small but critical firm, one whose proprietary technology her merger depended on. She thought she'd secured it through her new partner. She didn't know I'd already stepped in when negotiations stalled months ago. I hadn't done it to sabotage her, at least not at first. I did it because it was smart, because it was mine, because for once I didn't want to hand over the keys to something I built. The balcony door slid open behind me. My mother stepped out, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You shouldn't take things so personally," she said gently, the way people do when they're asking you to swallow pain quietly. I laughed once, short and humorless. "It was my name, Mom. She's under a lot of pressure. So was I. I always had been." "You could have said something," I replied. She sighed. "Tonight is about Lydia. It always was." I watched her go back inside without waiting for my response. The old ache settled in my chest, familiar as a scar. For years, I'd told myself patience was maturity, that silence was strength, that eventually, if I worked hard enough, they'd see me. The balcony lights flickered. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from my attorney. "Confirmed. Transfer complete. You are now the majority stakeholder." My breath caught. Inside, applause erupted again. Lydia was being called to the stage for another toast, another round of praise. I smoothed my dress, squared my shoulders, and walked back into the room, not as a guest, not as the punchline, but as a woman finally ready to stop hiding. As Lydia raised her glass again, her eyes met mine across the room. For a split second, something like unease flickered there. Maybe she sensed it. Maybe she felt the shift before the ground moved beneath her feet. She smiled anyway. And that was when the host announced, "Before we continue, we have a special acknowledgement to make. A key stakeholder has joined us tonight, unexpectedly." Every head turned toward me. My heart thundered as the spotlight warmed my face. Lydia's smile froze, just slightly. I stepped forward, the room holding its breath. And that's where I'll stop, for now, because what I said next would split the room clean in two. The spotlight felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of every assumption ever made about me. I could hear the soft hum of the lights above, the faint clink of champagne glasses settling back onto trays. Somewhere in the back of the room, someone cleared their throat. I hadn't planned to speak, not tonight. I'd promised myself I wouldn't let Lydia's moment into a battlefield. But life has a way of pushing you forward when you've spent too long standing still. The host smiled at me, that practice smile people use when they think they know who you are. "Veronica Ashford," he said, reading from a card. "If you'd like to come up and say a few words." A few words? I walked toward the stage, heels echoing against marble floors that had probably seen 100 victories and just as many quiet defeats. With each step, memories rose up uninvited. Me standing in kitchens and offices and living rooms, always behind someone else, always applauding. I reached the microphone and adjusted it slightly. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I wasn't expecting this, I began, my voice carrying farther than I thought it would. But I suppose that's fitting. Tonight seems to be about surprises. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Lydia laughed too, though her eyes were sharp now, searching my face like she was looking for a crack. I want to congratulate my sister, I continued. This merger represents years of hard work, long nights, and a belief that something small could become something powerful. That part was true. I paused, letting silence stretch just long enough to feel intentional. I also want to acknowledge the people behind the scenes, the ones who don't always get mentioned, the ones who build quietly. I glanced at Lydia. She shifted her weight, her smile tightening. As of this afternoon, I said, I finalized the acquisition of Horizon Systems, the firm responsible for the core analytics platform being integrated into this merger. The room stilled. Not a breath, not a whisper. I watched recognition dawn on a few faces. The legal team, a man near the front clutching a folder too tightly. I saw the partner executives exchange looks. I saw Ethan's brow furrow in confusion. Lydia blinked once, twice. That makes me, I finished, the majority stakeholder in a technology your merged company cannot operate without. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a low murmur rolled through the crowd like distant thunder. The host's smile faltered. Well, this is certainly unexpected. Lydia stepped toward me, her heels sharp, her voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. "What are you doing?" she hissed, still smiling for the audience. "Telling the truth," I replied quietly. Her hand tightened around her glass. "This isn't funny." "I'm not joking." The room erupted into applause then, not the mocking kind, not the polite kind. This was loud, startled, uncertain applause, the kind people give when they sense power shifting but aren't sure yet where to stand. The host cleared his throat again. "Well, I think we all need a moment to process this revelation." Lydia laughed too loudly. "Of course, my sister always loves surprises." I stepped back, relinquishing the microphone. The spotlight dimmed, but the eyes stayed on me. I felt exposed, yes, but also lighter, like I finally set something heavy down. As the crowd broke into clusters of whispered conversations, Lydia pulled me aside near a tall arrangement of white roses. Up close, I could see the fury simmering beneath her composure. "You humiliated me," she said. I met her gaze. "You humiliated me first." That was a joke. Jokes are supposed to be funny. She scoffed. "You had no right to do this here." "I had every right," I said evenly. "I built something. I protected it. I didn't steal it from you. You used my merger to position yourself." "I used an opportunity you overlooked," I corrected. "There's a difference." Her face flushed. "You think this makes you better than me?" I shook my head. "No, I think it makes me equal." That word hit her harder than any accusation could have. Equal. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You always do this. You wait, you watch, and then you swoop in like some kind of martyr." I laughed softly, the sound surprising even me. "You don't get to call me a martyr when you've been comfortable letting me bleed." Her eyes flicked away for a split second, and in that crack I saw something else. Fear. Our mother approached, her expression tight with concern. "What is going on?" she demanded. Lydia spoke quickly. "Lydia decided to make tonight about herself." I took a breath. "I didn't decide that, Mom. I was invited to speak." My mother looked between us, clearly overwhelmed. "Can't this wait?" I thought of all the times I'd waited, all the dinners, holidays, phone calls, where I swallowed words that burned my tongue. "No," I said gently, "it can't." Ethan joined us then, his face pale. "Veronica, Lydia didn't know about this?" "No," I said. He turned to Lydia. "You said Horizon Systems was locked in." "It was supposed to be," she snapped. "But you didn't read the final clause, did you?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened just enough to confirm it. The clause had been my safeguard, a buyout option triggered by delayed funding, something I'd suggested months ago when Lydia called me panicking. She trusted me then, trusted me without listening. "You let me help you. You just didn't think I'd help myself, too." Her jaw trembled. "So what now? You want credit and apology?" I considered the question. The old me would have wanted both. The old me would have wanted her to finally say my name without a joke attached. "What I want," I said slowly, "is clarity." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a slim folder. "I'm willing to license Horizon's technology back to the company under fair terms, transparent terms, with proper acknowledgement." "And if I say no?" she asked. I met her gaze. "Then the merger pauses, and the room finds out why." Silence settled between us, thick and unavoidable. Around us, the party struggled to regain its rhythm. Music resumed at a lower volume. Laughter sounded forced. Eyes kept drifting our way. Lydia looked smaller then, not powerless, never that, but exposed. "You planned this," she whispered. "I prepared for it," I corrected. "There's a difference." She laughed bitterly. "You always needed to win." I shook my head. "I needed to stop losing myself." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. Our father approached, his voice low and stern. "Veronica, this isn't the time or place." I turned to him. "When would have been?" He didn't answer. The truth sat between us like a mirror no one wanted to look into. Eventually, Lydia exhaled sharply. "Fine, we'll talk tomorrow." I nodded. "With lawyers." She flinched. As she walked away, shoulders rigid, I felt the strange mix of victory and grief that comes when you finally choose yourself. It wasn't the rush I'd imagined. It was quieter, heavier, real. I left the party shortly after, not because I was asked to, but because I wanted to. The night air wrapped around me as I stepped onto the street, the city humming like it always had, indifferent to my personal reckoning. My phone buzzed again, a message this time from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you just stepped into." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Above me, the hotel lights glowed, a monument to success built on fragile foundations. I slipped my phone back into my clutch, unaware that the biggest betrayal of all hadn't happened yet. Because while Lydia had underestimated me, someone else had been watching much more closely, and they weren't family. I didn't sleep that night. The city outside my apartment window pulsed with the same indifferent rhythm it always had. Cars sledding past, sirens wailing somewhere far off, a drunk couple arguing on the corner like their world was ending. Inside, my living room lamp cast a small circle of light that felt too fragile for the thoughts crowding my head. "You have no idea what you just stepped into." The message replayed itself over and over, like a whisper you hear just before waking from a nightmare. I checked the number again. No name, no company signature, just a threat or a warning floating in digital space. I sat on the couch, shoes kicked off, dress pooled around me like evidence from a crime scene. For the first time that night, my hands started to shake. Not from fear exactly, from realization. Power doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It reveals itself quietly, through consequences. At 32, I had learned how to survive without being seen. I hadn't learned how to survive after being noticed. I thought about Lydia's face when the room turned, the disbelief, the way her confidence cracked just enough for fear to slip through. I didn't enjoy it the way I'd imagined I might. It felt like watching a childhood home burn down. Necessary, maybe, but still devastating. People assume vindication feels like joy. It doesn't. It feels like grief finally being allowed to breathe. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. "We need to talk. Lydia is spiraling." I stared at the message for a long moment before placing the phone face down on the coffee table. For once, I didn't rush to manage the fallout. For once, I let someone else sit in discomfort. Growing up, I had been the emotional shock absorber. When Lydia slammed doors, I smoothed things over. When my parents argued, I translated silence into peace. I learned early that love, in my family, was conditional on usefulness. Flashbacks came uninvited. I was 16, standing in the hallway while Lydia screamed that I'd ruined her life by telling our parents she'd been sneaking out. She never mentioned that I'd covered for her for months first. I was 21, handing her my savings so she could move to a city I'd never been brave enough to choose for myself. I was 27, sitting across from her at a cafe while she talked for 40 minutes straight about her startup, never once asking how I was doing. And I let it happen, because somewhere deep down, I believed this was the price of belonging. The next morning came too quickly. I showered, dressed, and drank coffee that tasted like nothing. My reflection looked different. Older, sharper, like someone had finally adjusted the focus. I didn't recognize her completely, but I didn't look away either. At 10 a.m., my attorney called. "Veronica," she said, her voice brisk but pleased, "you're officially receiving inquiries." "Inquiries?" I said, feeling a slight tinge of unease. "From the merged company's board, from competitors, and from a private equity group I don't love." Something in her tone made my spine straighten. "Why don't you love them?" "They have a reputation," she said carefully. "They smile while they strangle." I thought of the anonymous text. Do they send cryptic messages? A pause. "Have you received something?" "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. "Forward it to me. And Veronica, be careful. You've moved from being underestimated to being inconvenient." After the call ended, I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of her words. Inconvenient. That was a dangerous place to exist. By noon, the story had leaked. Not the full truth, never that, but enough to ignite speculation. Headlines framed it as a sibling power struggle. Commentators debated whether I was a silent genius or a bitter sister seeking revenge. No one asked why it took so long for me to speak. My mother called 3 times. I didn't answer. Lydia called once. I let it ring. Instead, I went for a walk. I needed movement, something physical to remind me I existed beyond screens and contracts and other people's expectations. The park near my apartment buzzed with life. Parents chasing toddlers, joggers lost in headphones, an elderly man feeding birds like it was his only ritual left. I sat on a bench and watched the world continue without me. It felt grounding. That's when someone sat beside me. "Veronica Ashford," a man's voice said smoothly. "You don't look like the villain they're painting you to be." My heart skipped. I turned slowly. He was well-dressed, mid-40s, the kind of face that had practiced neutrality for a living. Calm eyes, assessing. "Do I know you?" I asked, not taking his hand. "Not yet," he said, offering a hand. "Marcus Hale." The name hit like a quiet alarm bell. Hale Capital, the private equity firm my attorney had warned me about. "I didn't realize parks were part of your due diligence," I said, not taking his hand. He smiled. "I prefer conversations without boardrooms. People are more honest when they don't feel watched." I stood. "Then you picked the wrong person." He chuckled softly. "You surprised a lot of people last night." "I didn't invite you to comment." "No," he agreed. "You invited attention." I felt the shift then, the subtle recalibration of power. This wasn't a chance encounter, it was a move. "What do you want?" I asked smoothly. "To help," he said smoothly.
Your sister's merger is fragile. Your technology is essential. We can make you very comfortable. And Lydia? He shrugged. Family dynamics are complicated. There it was. The dismissal. The implication that collateral damage was acceptable. I'm not interested, I said. Everyone is, he replied calmly. Eventually. I stepped back. You should leave. He studied me for a moment longer, then nodded. I'll be in touch. As he walked away, my phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from Lydia. You think you've won. You have no idea what you've started. The words sat heavy in my chest. That afternoon, I finally returned my mother's call. She cried. She said families don't do this to each other. She asked how I could hurt Lydia so publicly. She didn't ask why Lydia thought it was okay to humiliate me first. I just wanted peace, my mother said. So did I replied quietly. I just wanted it to include me. She didn't have an answer for that. By evening, exhaustion wrapped around me like fog. I made dinner I barely touched and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the same spot on the wall I'd stared at during 100 late nights helping Lydia. That's when the email arrived. Not from Marcus, not from Lydia, from Horizon Systems. Subject line, urgent internal discrepancy. My pulse spiked as I opened it. There were attachments, audit logs, internal memos, timestamps that didn't align. Evidence that someone inside Horizon had been leaking information months before the acquisition. My company, my risk. And the final line of the email made my breath catch. We believe the breach originated from a source connected to your sister's merger partner. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was strategic. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it pressing down on me. Lydia hadn't just underestimated me, she might have endangered everything I'd built. Or worse, she might have known. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one. I felt very alone in that moment, not abandoned, but exposed, standing at the edge of something far bigger than sibling rivalry. I reached for my phone, fingers hovering over Lydia's name. For the first time in my life, I wasn't calling to help her. I was calling to confront her. And I already knew this conversation would change everything.
My finger hovered over Lydia's name longer than it should have. Funny how someone you've known your entire life can suddenly feel like a stranger, like dialing their number means crossing into enemy territory. I pressed call. It rang once, twice. Then her voice came through, sharp and tired. What? Not hello, not Veronica, just what? We need to talk, I said. There was a pause, then a humorless laugh. Now you want to talk? Yes, now. Silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. I could almost picture her pacing, heels clicking, jaw tight the way it got when she felt cornered. Come to my place, she finally said, if you're brave enough. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, phone still pressed to my ear, my heartbeat loud in the quiet apartment. Brave enough. Lydia had always framed conflict like a competition, something to be won through intimidation. I used to shrink from it. Tonight, I didn't. Her penthouse overlooked the river, all glass and steel and curated minimalism. It smelled faintly of expensive candles and tension. When she opened the door, she didn't hug me. She didn't step aside politely either. She turned and walked back in, assuming I'd follow. I did. She poured herself a drink, didn't offer me one. So, she said, leaning against the counter, you've enjoyed your little moments of fame. This isn't about fame. There's been a data breach at Horizon. Her hand froze mid-pour. I watched her carefully, too carefully. A breach, she repeated. That's not my problem. It is if the source is connected to your merger partner, I said, which it is. She scoffed, but her eyes darted away. You're paranoid. I have audit logs, Lydia, timelines, internal memos. Someone had access they shouldn't have had, months ago. She took a long sip of her drink. So, what are you accusing me of? I'm asking if you knew. Her laugh was brittle. You think I'd sabotage your precious company? I think, I said slowly, that you've always believed my work belonged to you. That landed. Her shoulders stiffened. You're unbelievable, she snapped. After everything I've done for you? For me? I interrupted, heat rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Name one thing you've done for me that didn't benefit you. She opened her mouth, closed it. I pressed on. You used my ideas, my contacts, my labor, and when I finally protected myself, you called it betrayal. Her eyes flashed. You blindsided me. You humiliated me, I shot back, publicly, and you didn't even feel bad about it. Her voice dropped. You deserved it. The words hit harder than I expected. I felt them in my chest, like something collapsing inward. Why? I asked, quietly. She looked away, staring out at the city lights. For a moment, she didn't look powerful or polished. She looked small. Because, she said, barely audible, if you're capable, then what does that make me? There it was. Not confidence, not superiority, fear. You've always been the safe one, the smart one, the dependable one. Everyone leaned on you. I had to shine or I'd disappear. So you pushed me into the dark? I asked. She turned back to me, eyes hard again. You stayed there willingly. That wasn't true, but it wasn't entirely false either, and that realization hurt more than her words. There's more, I said, my voice steady, despite the ache. Your partner, Marcus Hale, approached me today. Her face drained of color. You met Marcus, she whispered. Yes, and now I'm asking again. Did you know? She swallowed. I knew they were aggressive, that's business. Aggressive doesn't mean illegal. She slammed her glass down. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I do, I said. I always have. You just never cared when I was the one carrying it. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, then quickly turned it face down. Too quickly. What is it? I asked. Nothing. Lydia? She laughed weakly. You think you're so righteous now, like you didn't enjoy watching me squirm last night. I didn't, I honestly said. I enjoyed not disappearing. Her phone buzzed again. This time, I reached for it before she could stop me. She grabbed my wrist. Don't. I pulled free and picked it up. A message from Marcus Hale lit the screen. She's getting difficult. If she won't cooperate, we move forward without her. My breath caught. I looked at Lydia. You made a deal. She shook her head rapidly. It wasn't like that. They said they'd stabilize the merger, protect me. By exploiting my company? Her eyes filled with tears, the first real ones I'd seen. I didn't think they'd go that far. But you let them in. You handed them access. She slid down onto a stool, suddenly looking exhausted. I just wanted to win, for once. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. You didn't just put me at risk, I said softly. You put yourself at risk too. She looked up. What are you going to do? That question, so simple, so loaded, hung between us. For years, my answer would be automatic. Fix it, protect her, absorb the damage. But something had changed. I'm going to protect myself and Horizon. Her face crumpled. So you're just going to let them destroy me? I thought of every time I'd begged silently for protection, for fairness, for acknowledgement. No, I said, I'm giving you a choice. I pulled out my phone and forwarded the breach evidence to her. We confront Marcus together, full transparency, lawyers present. Or I walk away and everything comes out. She stared at the screen, trembling. If I do this, she whispered, I lose everything. I met her gaze. If you don't, you lose yourself.
Tears spilled freely now. She covered her face, shoulders shaking. I watched her, my sister, my rival, my burden, and felt something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a storm gathering over the city. She looked up at me, then eyes red, voice breaking. I don't know how to do this without you. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to reassure her. I know, I said. That's the problem. My phone buzzed again. A new message from Marcus Hale. Clock's ticking. I turned the screen toward Lydia. Decide. She stared at it, then at me. And in that moment, I realized the truth that scared me most of all. Whether she chose me or not, this might be the last time I ever stood beside my sister.
Lydia didn't answer right away. She stared at the phone like it might bite her, like the glowing screen held a verdict she wasn't ready to read out loud. The city outside her penthouse windows was dark now, clouds stacking over the skyline like unspoken threats. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time. For the first time in our lives, I didn't fill the silence for her. I need time, she finally said, her voice small. You don't have it, I replied. Neither of us does. She rubbed her temples, pacing. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't been living with this pressure for months? And you didn't think to tell me? She stopped pacing. I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now. I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it was painfully familiar. You mean like I finally see you? Her jaw tightened. You always think you're morally superior. No, I said. I think I'm done lying to myself. The room felt charged, like static before a storm breaks. I could feel years of resentment pressing against the walls, threatening to spill out. Lydia poured herself another drink, hands shaking so badly she spilled some on the marble counter. She didn't wipe it up. Marcus isn't who you think he is, she said quietly. I know exactly who he is. That's why I'm afraid. She looked up sharply. Afraid? Of what? Of how easily he'll discard you when you stop being useful. That landed. Lydia flinched just slightly, but enough. He promised protection, she whispered. So did everyone who ever used you, I said gently. Did any of them keep that promise? She sank into a chair, shoulders slumping. For a moment, she didn't look like the woman who commanded boardrooms and headlines. She looked like my little sister, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms because she was afraid of the dark. I can't lose everything, she said. I crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. You already are. You're just losing it slowly. Her phone buzzed again. Marcus. She didn't pick it up this time. I need to go, I said. She looked startled. Go? Yes. I stood. You know the terms. Call me when you're ready to choose. You're just leaving? For once, I said quietly, yes. I walked out before she could stop me, before she could say something that would pull me back into the old patterns. The elevator ride down felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked steadier than I felt. Outside, rain had started to fall, soft at first, then heavier. I didn't bother with an umbrella. I welcomed the cold against my skin, the clarity it brought. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Unknown numbers, emails, messages from people who suddenly remembered my name. I ignored them all, until one notification made my breath hitch. From Horizon Systems, internal legal, subject, emergency board meeting, immediate attendance required. I glanced at the time, 11:47 p.m. Nothing good ever started with an emergency meeting at midnight. The boardroom was tense when I arrived, faces lit harshly by overhead lights. My CTO, Daniel, looked relieved and worried all at once when he saw me. Veronica, he said, pulling me aside, it's worse than we thought. How much worse? He lowered his voice. The breach wasn't just data extraction. They planted something. My stomach dropped. Planted what? Code, a back door. If it activates, it could compromise everything. Clients, intellectual property, all of it. I felt cold all over. How long has it been there? Months, he said.
right around the time Lydia brought in her new partner. The room seemed to tilt. So this wasn't just opportunistic, it was planned. Daniel nodded grimly, and whoever did it knew our systems intimately. My mind raced. That level of access required trust, someone on the inside, or someone with guidance from someone who knew me, someone who'd listened while I explained things late at night over the phone. The thought made my chest ache. The board meeting was a blur of legal terms, risk assessments, and urgent decisions. By the end of it, one thing was clear. If this went public before we neutralized the threat, Horizon could collapse. "And Marcus Hale?" I asked when there was a pause. The room went quiet. "We can't prove his involvement yet, but we suspect Hale Capital was positioning for a hostile takeover if the merger failed. Using my sister as leverage, using me as collateral." I clenched my jaw. "Then we cut them off. That will escalate things," the lawyer warned. "Good," I said. "I'm tired of being quiet." When the meeting finally adjourned, it was nearly 3 a.m. I sat alone in the empty boardroom, staring at the city lights through the glass walls. Power came at a cost. Tonight, I was finally paying it. My phone rang. Lydia. I stared at her name, heart pounding. Then I answered. "I'm in," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll confront Marcus with you." Relief washed over me, quickly followed by fear. "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted, "but I can't keep doing this alone." "Neither can I." We agreed to meet the next morning at my attorney's office, neutral ground, controlled environment. Lydia sounded terrified, and for the first time, honest. After we hung up, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I rested my forehead against the cool glass, breathing slowly. I wanted to believe this was the turning point, that choosing transparency would lead to healing, but somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered a warning. Men like Marcus Hale don't lose quietly. And sure enough, when I checked my voicemail later that morning, there was a new message waiting for me. His voice was calm, amused. "Veronica," he said, "I'd reconsider your next move if I were you. Families have a way of fracturing under pressure." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, heart racing, because now it wasn't just business, it wasn't just betrayal, it was a threat. And I knew, absolutely knew, that whatever happened next would decide more than the fate of a company. It would decide whether I finally broke free or paid the price for daring to stand in the light.
Marcus's voicemail sat in my phone like a loaded weapon. I replayed it twice, then a third time, listening not just to the words, but the tone, the ease with which he said families have a way of fracturing. It wasn't a threat screamed in anger. It was worse. It was said like a fact. I didn't tell Lydia about the message right away, not because I wanted to protect her. If I was honest, I was tired of protecting her, but because I needed to understand it first. Men like Marcus didn't bluff unless they had leverage. By the time morning light filtered through my apartment windows, I had already called my attorney, forwarded the voicemail, and requested a security review. I had also called my therapist and left a message I didn't usually leave. I need an emergency session. Growth doesn't erase fear, it teaches you how to move while carrying it. Lydia arrived at the law office late, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, her confidence replaced by something brittle and frantic. She looked like someone who hadn't slept, like someone who'd finally realized the cost of pretending. We didn't hug, we barely looked at each other. The conference room was all glass and steel, neutral to the point of coldness. My attorney, Elaine, wasted no time. "Before Marcus arrives," she said, "you both need to understand something. Once this meeting starts, there's no going back to the version of your relationship that existed before." Lydia swallowed. "I don't think that version exists anymore." Elaine nodded. "Good. Then we proceed with clarity." Marcus arrived 10 minutes early. Of course he did. He walked in like he owned the space. Easy smile, relaxed posture, tailored suit that probably cost more than my first car.
He looked at Lydia first, then at me. "Well," he said pleasantly, "this is cozy." "Sit down," Elaine said sharply. He raised an eyebrow, amused, but complied. What followed was not a conversation, it was a chess match. Evidence placed carefully on the table. Emails, logs, contract clauses Marcus had clearly assumed no one would read closely enough to connect. At first, he denied everything, calmly, smoothly. Then Elaine slid the audit report across the table. The smile faded. Not completely, but enough. "You've misunderstood the situation," Marcus said. "No, you've underestimated who was paying attention." He leaned back, studying me. "You're impressive," he said, "truly. But let's not pretend you're in control here." "That depends," I said, "on how public you want this to become." For the first time, his gaze sharpened. Lydia finally spoke. "You told me you were protecting me." He looked at her then, really looked, and whatever charm he'd been using disappeared. "I told you what you needed to hear." Her face crumpled, but she didn't look away. "You used me." He shrugged. "You wanted to win." Something inside Lydia broke then. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that couldn't be undone. I saw it in the way her shoulders slumped, the way her voice steadied as she said, "Get out." Marcus laughed softly. "You don't get to dismiss me." Elaine slid one final document forward. "Actually, you do. This is a cease and desist backed by evidence already escrowed with federal counsel. If Mr. Hale does not leave now and sever all ties, the next conversation happens in court." Silence. Then Marcus stood, slowly. He looked at me one last time. "This isn't over." I met his gaze. "It never is, but it is finished between us." He left without another word. When the door closed, Lydia collapsed into a chair, shaking. I stayed standing, my legs barely holding me up. The adrenaline drained fast, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Elaine cleared her throat. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" After the lawyers left, Lydia and I sat alone, the hum of the building loud in the quiet. She removed her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes. "I didn't think he'd turn on me," she whispered. I sat across from her. "That's because you've never had to imagine a world where you weren't protected." She flinched. "That's not fair." "No," I said gently, "it's true." She covered her face. "I ruined everything." "You damaged things," I corrected. "So did I by staying silent for too long." She looked up, surprised. "I taught you," I continued, "that I would always clean up the mess, that you could take and I'd still be there." Her voice cracked. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said, and I did, but intent doesn't erase impact. We sat with that for a while. The truth is uncomfortable when it finally has space to breathe. Horizons stabilized quickly once the back door was neutralized. Clients were notified carefully. Trust, once shaken, had to be rebuilt brick by brick. I threw myself into the work, not to escape, but to reclaim it. For the first time, the company felt like mine, not something I'd built for someone else to stand on. Lydia stepped back from public life. She issued a statement citing personal reasons. The headlines speculated wildly. I didn't comment. Silence can be a boundary, too. Our parents tried to intervene. Family dinners were proposed. Apologies hinted at, but never fully spoken. I declined. Not forever, just for now. Healing requires distance before reconciliation. Weeks passed. Therapy sessions dug up old wounds and stitched them back together more carefully. I learned that strength isn't endurance, it's discernment. That love without limits isn't love, it's erosion. One evening, Lydia showed up at my door unannounced. She looked different, quieter. "I started therapy," she said, almost shyly. I nodded. "That's good." "I don't expect forgiveness," she continued. "I just wanted you to know I'm trying." I studied her. The urge to comfort rose instinctively, and I let it pass. Trying matters, I said, but consistency matters more. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I know. When she left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful, and that surprised me most of all. A month later, I attended a small industry conference. No spotlight, no spectacle, just quiet recognition. A colleague introduced me as the founder of Horizon, and no one laughed. I realized then that the night of the merger party hadn't been the end of something, it had been the beginning of a life where I no longer needed permission to take up space. I went home that night, poured myself a glass of wine, and stood by the window watching the city glow. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who believed love meant silence, that family meant sacrifice without reciprocity. She deserved better, and so did I. The truth is, being mocked didn't break me. Being underestimated didn't either. What changed everything was realizing that my worth had never been up for debate, only my willingness to defend it.